I see this as almost like if you could have the two guys sit in the same video and just talk about watches.
Yeah.
And there's no question for me, the two that come up in my mind are Mayor JCB would be just the best. Because like
that would be both like frantic,
for
the people listening to this and not watching this on YouTube, Ben, the smile on Ben's face the moment James said that, I think like broke the edges of the Zoom recording here. It's pretty wild. Hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah, good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice to see everybody's face. You guys have like big microphones. I don't my AirPods don't even work. I've got one in and it doesn't even do anything.
It's fake AirPods.
It's a professional endeavor.
Yeah.
But I have to admit some jealousy at Steven's over microphone coming down and in. That's something else.
It's funny.
What is that? What is that clipped onto?
There's a whole like
ceiling?
tension fit arm here that's like clipped to the side of the shelving unit on my wall. This is absurd. The good news is we have some fun stuff to talk about. Watch Madness. We're recording this on Friday. Watch Madness is officially over. We have a winner. It will be announced in the next hour or two on the site. So by the time anybody's hearing
this, did I win?
It's you. Yeah, actually, it's that secret episode. Yeah,
the secret episode.
The secret episode. Right. Yeah. You have to own all of our limited editions to have access to that,
exactly.
episode.
It's hosted by Eric
Super
Clapton.
Easter egg.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. God, that would be amazing. Yeah. So it's over. We have a winner. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get deep into kind of how this whole thing went. Some of our favorite matchups, some of the kind of unsung episodes that maybe didn't quite get their due in our not so humble opinions. I just want your hot takes here. Like, what are your personal reactions to how Watch Madness has gone before we get deep into the weeds here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been crazy. It's the level of engagement that kind of blew me away. And then, a couple of folks, and we'll definitely get into this, but a couple of folks actually like getting into the mix with the commenters and that kind of thing has been like so charming and kind of fun and like really lighthearted, which is comment sections aren't always lighthearted. Ours are typically great, but that's not a common factor on the internet. And then to see Gary and some others kind of actually being involved in that process is great. And then I mean just kind of the general level of enthusiasm around this idea, which is it's hard to say that one talking watches is actually better than another because they're all distinct. They're about a person, so they're a personality story to an extent, and the expression into watches. But to see people like get behind this as like a piece of entertainment, I've really enjoyed just kind of like armchair, kind of basking in the glow of what Will put together with all this.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that though he is not in the final championship level matchup here, the real winner of all this is Gary Steingart, right? I mean, this guy is a champion for his engagement in the comments.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
Gary and a small cadre of other Talking Watches alums all ended up on like a group chat and were like scheming behind the scenes for all of this, which I just love that these guys were that engaged. And like, I didn't find out about it till like a week ago, I guess. As we were entering the final rounds, I was chatting with Gary and he mentioned it. But yeah, these guys were like doing their own thing the whole time behind the scenes, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's just like, Gary is such an amazing and such like a charismatic human being. And I just think like to have his take on everything, which is so kind of like pithy and so funny and so kind of clever all the time. And in every post that we did, it was just a real delight, even from my side, just to see that happening.
That's awesome. Let's do a quick recap for people who aren't aware of kind of how this ended, right? So we started out 53 episodes. There were some bye rounds, and it was a first round, a second round, then a Sweet 16, an Elite 8, a Final 4, and then the championship. So let's start with we'll start kind of in the later rounds here. So we have the Final 4. It came down to Gary Steingart, who we talked about, going up against the original John Mayer episode. Those two episodes, I think, in some ways, like, couldn't be more different and also couldn't be more similar. It's like two guys who are like really nerdy about watches and really love them, but in like kind of different ways.
Yeah, and two guys who are like completely inside their own heads as well. Like they couldn't be more different in so many ways, but they're also, as you said, extremely similar.
Yeah.
And two
on the
two
other
really
side of
charming personalities as well.
Yeah,
Like
two,
I think
very
that's
real personalities, you know.
But I think
Completely.
that also speaks to their ability to kill their every time they had a competition. Is there's just this like there's no guard with either of them. They're just kind of like, I'm gonna just it's out. I'm doing this. It's all out. It's just pure personality, and I think it's incredible for sure. There's a commitment, I think, to being okay with the cameras and talking about your watches and all these things. And obviously, that's the point from our standpoint. But that's not something that's always communicated with someone who's or natural to someone who's on the program.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that, frankly, Gary got to the Final Four. You know, I mean, that means he went further than, you know, Aziz Ansari and Jack Nicklaus and Mario Andretti and the second John Mayer, which is like one of the craziest things I've ever seen just as a watch person. It's pretty fun for sure.
Yeah. All right, and on the other side of the bracket, opposite those two guys, were two other incredible personalities that, again, in some ways couldn't be more similar, couldn't be more different. Is John Goldberger and Jean-Claude Biver.
Yeah, I mean, come on. That's like the heaviest of heavy hitters you could possibly imagine. You know, both those guys are like heroes to not only me, but, you know, I would say all of us, you know, anybody in the watch industry, certainly in the watch collecting industry world. That was a very, very close one, I believe.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, it came down to single digit votes. It was real close.
Wow.
So the guys that emerged from the Final Four and made it to the championship were Mayer and Goldberger, the two Johns.
Two tall Johns, yeah.
Yeah, two tall Johns, exactly. Not just two Johns, two tall Johns. And that's like, I mean, these are like as classic a pair of Talking Watches episodes as you could hope for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, these are the guys that laid the foundation, right? I mean, this was episode number 1 and number 3, I believe, with JJ in between. And, you know, it's really, you know, these are, you know, I hesitate to use this word about anything we've ever done, but like, these are iconic videos, you know, these are things that, like, you know, have shaped the collecting culture over the last however many years, 7 years. So it makes sense that they're both together. You know, they know each other. I've hung out with them both. You know, they have a lot of respect for one another. Couldn't be, you know, more different. You know what I mean? I mean, John is so animated and so quirky and so strange, and Goldberger is so monotone and just like very reserved. You know, John is, you know, this like suburban white kid from Connecticut, and Goldberger comes from this, you know, really prominent European aristocratic family, you know, this beautiful home in Bologna, like a town home in Bologna. Just really different upbringings, you know, different kind of ideas behind what a collection is. But, you know, just two of the absolute best, no question about it. Like these guys belonged in the Final Four for sure.
Yeah, my favorite thing was, you know, when we found out these were the two final guys, I shot them each an email and was just like, hey, you made it to the finals. Can you just give me a
finals
comment?
of what?
Yeah, right, exactly. The funny thing is they both knew, and they both responded like immediately, which was pretty funny. But yeah, I shot them each a note and was just like, hey, you're going up against the other John. Can you just give me a few words about like what you think of your competitor, your competition, as a collector, and kind of what they mean to the watch space? And each one of them said that they looked up to the other one in certain ways, and that they thought the other one should be the winner, that it was like a clear choice, that it was not them. And I actually buy it. Like, I don't think it's false modesty from either of them. I think they have this amazing relationship and each really respect what the other one brings to the table, which to me is ultimately what makes this whole endeavor so special, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they represent two pinnacles of like two pillars that this world, you know, our world needs. I mean, one of them is like mass appeal, right? I mean, like nobody has put better watches in front of more people than John Mayer over the years. Like it's just a fact. There's not anybody, Clapton included. Like, you know, he's kind of off the grid. He doesn't post on Instagram. You don't see him wearing a great AP on stage that much anymore. So you've got this like mass exposure to like mainstream world. And then you have like a connoisseur, like an actual academic in Goldberger. You have somebody that is like actually doing research on the, you know, production numbers of Cartiers in the 1940s, things like that. So you've got these two very different kind of tenets of what the watch world needs, and combined, you know, it's a special thing for sure.
And ultimately, our winner, as probably a surprise to no one, is Mr.
James
John
Stacey.
Mayer.
Oh,
James Stacey. Yeah,
James Stacey won. Yeah.
It's the other secret episode. It's the secret
exactly.
episode. Yeah, so our winner is Mr. John Mayer. I mean, that's I don't think super shocking to anybody. I think it's the original episode. It started it all. I think it was probably the favorite going into this.
I think so. Yeah.
And like, that's fine. Like, I feel like everyone can kind of like sleep at night knowing that he won. And like, if you got knocked out in an earlier round or knocked out by John, like, it's okay. You can't really be upset about it.
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is like that video is what launched this whole series. So you kind of have to, kind of give respect where it's due there. And I think also, like, as I've said many times, and I think somebody even pointed out in the comments on this, was that like that video, I get, well, not any longer, I'm afraid, but I used to get stopped on the street when I used to go out on the street all the time and say like, hey, like that video like got me into watches, period, like straight up. You know, not even like, it wasn't like John Mayer did it, it wasn't Hodinkee did it. It was like that particular 11-minute video or however long it is got people really excited about watches. And so I think that video deserves to be the winner here for sure. Winner, what does it mean? Not all that much, right? This was just a fun thing to kind of bide the time because March Madness wasn't happening and all professional sports are off. So don't put too much stock in this. This was truly just meant for fun. But I'm happy with the outcome for sure.
I was surprised that it went. I guess I expected Mayer 1 or Mayer 2 or Goldberger or Moki to just kind of cut their way through a path.
Yeah.
Because there's some people's champion element to Moki. Like it's so awesome. And obviously I have a huge bias there because I was the host of that episode and I love that dude and I always will. But right. I was in planning my seeds, I wasn't sure Mayer 1 or Mayer 2 because the size of the audience for the website was much larger by the time Mayer 2 came around. And I thought maybe that might be a whole new kind of generation of Hodinkee readers footnote for their like, and they're both great videos for sure. And I find it oddly, uplifting, I guess, that it's Mayer 1, like the proof of concept is still something that's resonated back through this. You don't get a lot of TV shows where the pilot was the one that people go, you know what, that's the one I would vote for as my favorite episode, and I think it's killer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I thought Moki was going to go pretty far, and he did.
I definitely thought 4. Yeah.
But the bracket was weird. There was some, the William Messina versus Fred Savage, in the first round, the Aziz versus Wei in the first round. Like there were a lot of things in the first round that like really kind of impacted later stuff. Like to me, like William, who's a good friend of mine, that was one of my favorite episodes just because I've known him and I thought the collection was great. But there's Fred Savage, and Fred is just Fred, and you never know. So I think a lot of it had to do with bracketing, and I truly have no idea how that bracket was created. So thank you to whoever did that for us.
The bracket was the result. It was done numerically. So it was done based on the order in which they were published. So there was really no element of chance. Like it wasn't pulled out of a hat, but it also wasn't purposefully set up.
Right.
But that gets us, Ben, into where I wanted to go with this, which is, what are some of the episodes that you think maybe got knocked out too soon, whether it's because voting was a little bit strange or whether it, surprised you or just because they got a really tough early matchup?
Yeah, I think, I think William would be one. I think Wei would be another. There was a lot of hullabaloo in the comments about Wei versus Aziz. And, Wei's the man. I mean, he's just an awesome dude and, good friend of the show and good friend of mine. I think the one thing that our audience kind of tends to forget sometimes is that our audience is not just pure, like watch loving dudes. And Aziz Ansari is like a major celebrity that is a real watch person and has like real sentimentality behind all of his collection. So, I think Wei could have gone deeper had he not had to face Aziz early on. Paramiko, like, it's, that collection is top 2, top 3 for me of all time. And there's some, kind of fun what ifs about that one for sure that I can share later. But like the Paramiko collection is just bananas. If you look at it as like, it's different categories. It's not just Rolex, like, say John's would be Rolex and Patek. It's much broader than even Goldberger's, in terms of scale. The Paramiko collection was amazing for sure. And I could have seen that going into the Final Four as well. Who did Moki end up losing to? I forget.
Paramiko.
To Paramiko.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it is what it is, right? I mean, I thought the Moki video was really something special. Just like I thought the Jack Nicklaus video was something special, like effectively like, one guy, one watch type stuff. I thought Jack could have gone further as well, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, we're not publishing the numbers on these polls for lots of reasons, but I'm happy to say and feel totally fine saying that Moki and Paramiko came down to less than 25 votes. That was a nail biter. It was super tight. And, you know, if you look at the comments on that, it's interesting to see how passionately people feel about like one sort of collecting versus another.
Yeah.
Which I think is another nice thing that this brought out in the comments was, you know, we got to see a lot of people share kind of their own perspectives on collecting. Our readers, the people who, you know, don't get interviewed and get 12 minutes, 15 minutes to talk about it.
Yeah.
But that was able to kind of come out through commenting on other episodes.
Agreed. I thought you know, what's funny is in the beginning of this, I was like, we'll see how, you know, we'll see if people care about this Watch Madness thing. And in the end, I love it. And I love the way that, as you said, Stephen, like people were just like, you know, so adamant that like Moki is superior to whatever Paramika. And it's like, okay, like what does that even mean? You know, it's just like, this is like one man's opinion about like a video. Like it doesn't, you know, it's just so funny how varied everyone's opinions are of everything, which again is why Hodinkee works and why watches work, is that like you can have guys care about watches for like dramatically different reasons, you know, like almost polar opposite. And I think we really saw that here for sure.
Yeah. I mean, James, did you have any others that you felt kind of got knocked out too soon?
I was surprised by Moki, like we've mentioned and talked about. Bayer was a surprise by me, simply because like I feel like the mix, and I think we see this through most of the matchups, there's a mix of personality and collection, right? And this isn't surprising. This isn't like some analytical revelation, but you need kind of both to go a really long way. And that's what you see in the Mayer and Goldberger, is a mix of just insane collections and knowledge and watch love, but also like a personality that comes out on the video and connects with the person who's watching it. And I thought we had both of those in Bayer and Savage. And I'm surprised neither of them went even further. I mean, like Bayer as kind of a champion of the watch industry, and Savage as kind of a champion of watch people, I think.
Yeah, I think the Bayer thing was really about like an anti-Steven vote, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, mostly.
Just like, fuck this guy.
Mostly. Yeah, it coalesced. Yeah. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have seen by this point the conspiracy theories about how having Gary on Hodinkee Radio and me mentioning that Gary and I had dinner a few weeks ago is that I fixed this against Alton Brown.
Oh, man. Well, you got to follow the money, right? Always follow the money.
Yeah. Always follow the money. Always.
That's a really nice
Gary's case, though, like the stakes. Yeah, right, exactly. I'm living in Gary's guest house upstate.
Exactly. The Renee Bayer episode was awesome. I mean, like, you know, as you said, like he's as old school as it gets, you know, getting these watches from like Hans Wilsdorf, you know, I mean, just amazing stuff. Another one that I think could have gone further just based on personality alone is Ahmed Rahman, Sherry Rahman. If you know him or have met him anywhere along the way, he is the most lovable, affable, friendly, welcoming human being. Like, I think I know. Like, I don't know that I know somebody nicer than him. He's definitely way nicer than neither of you. I can tell you that. And
that is like extremely true.
It's a low bar.
He's a special guy for sure.
Yeah, he was toward the top of my list. I think you know, Tony Fidel is somebody who, like, Tony drew John Mayer, the second John Mayer video in the first round, and the moment I saw that, I was just like, oh, that sucks. You know, Tony's another, like, he might be the smartest person I've ever met. Yeah, Tony just like super smart, great taste in watches, genuinely loves watches. I think that was a bummer matchup for me.
What do you guys think of Didi Kim versus Reza?
Interesting.
Because that's your cult of personality. You're like, he's obviously a very famous guy and loves watches, and that's incredible. And then you have Reza, like, just one of the most incredible collectors, a really sweet guy. Talk about a nice guy. You know, I got to do a dive watch panel with him and Heaton at H10 some time ago, lifetime ago at this point. But I thought that was an interesting matchup because it was really two absolute polar opposites in terms of their approach to watches. But obviously, it's all the same general passion that brings someone into it. And I mean, good on Kim for taking the public vote. That's solid. But I was surprised to not see Reza go a bit further because I think he has a lot of the same charm we see in Mayer and Goldberger and JCB.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, you know, whether I don't know what it was, but I think maybe because when we did the Talking Watches with Reza, we only focused on Rolex dive watches. And I think that was really limiting for him. And to be clear, like he's got dive watches like you've never seen in every brand, new, vintage, everything, Doxas, crazy stuff, And I think in some ways people didn't really appreciate how special of a collector he is. I mean, he is the guy for all dive watches, Omegas. I mean, you name it. And I think because we focus so heavily on Rolex, people are like, oh yeah, like this is cool. I mean, obviously Deep Sea #1 is amazing. But I think, if we were to do it again and we refocused on other stuff, I think he would go further. If we were
I would love to see a
Reza
Reza 2.
Pandemic, we'll do that again,
Yeah. A Reza 2
Exactly.
with Doxa would be something fun.
Yeah.
That's the most James Stacey content I've ever heard.
I was going to say
so,
it would be like you, James Lambden, and Jason Heaton as like the only
Yeah,
three
just-
people on.
We'd be voting, though. We'd be voting. The 3
be
votes
voting like
locked
crazy.
in.
The three of them. We do Doxa Madness.
Yeah.
I like it.
James,
On
Jason,
board.
and James. Yes.
All right. So we've gotten through kind of our picks for people we think maybe got knocked out too soon, but I want to know what things surprised you guys. I definitely found myself like I wasn't keeping a super close eye on this on the back end, so we would get the new bracket every day. It would end up filled out in the CMS, and I would see it, and there were days I was surprised. So I'm curious before I talk about mine, what surprised you guys the most?
No discredit to Gary and his campaigning and his spirit and his personality, because he is just simply an amazing human being. But I am surprised that Alan, just given the social media presence that Keegan has, couldn't kind of lean a little bit and just wipe that bracket right out. That was a bit of a surprise for me, because I thought just in terms of like genuine passion and personality, like Keegan Allen has all of it. The guy is magnetic in person. He's a really incredible dude. And I thought that it's a tough matchup because in many ways they share a very similar like general humanness to the way that they talk about their watches and the way they talk about themselves and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a tough matchup, but that one was definitely like for me a coin in the air, but I definitely thought it was coming down Alan. So I was a little surprised on that outcome.
I hear you. I mean, Keegan is a very
What a sweetheart.
popular, like just not even likable, he's a lovable person,
For sure.
Also in really good shape, we found out.
Oh, fair.
Yeah.
Just a great, like shoots Leica. I mean, he's totally like our guy, I'm surprised also. I think, Gary's just so Gary, and there's just nobody else like him.
He's special.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a special
For
guy. If Mayor 1 didn't exist, or like let's say we like forgot to press record on that, imagine we did that, and like that video just didn't exist, I think Mayor would have won that. I think everybody kind of knew that Mayor 1 was the favorite, so Mayor 2 kind of got knocked out. In a different routing or different routing, I could see there being 2 John Mayer videos in the Final Four.
If the path didn't necessitate Goldberger and Mayer going head to head, Mayer 2 going head to head before the Final Four, I agree with you. I had Goldberger as a favorite through all of this. I really think people, it's one of the videos that people talk about the most, just when I meet folks, and I was kind of betting big on Goldberger.
Yeah, look, I mean he's as cool as they get. I mean, there's just nobody cooler than that guy.
I think one that surprised me was our mutual friend Matt Jacobson beating Fred Savage. Coming out of the second round into the Sweet 16. I love Matt, and we'll talk about this later about of the collections shown. If you could swap your collection for one of the collections in a video, which would it be? And like Matt is toward the top of my list there. He's also a good friend, but Fred is just so magnetic, and I think has such kind of broad mass appeal, and his watch collecting story is something that I think a lot of people relate to. I was a little surprised there. I mean, in some ways, kind of impressed at people's, faith in Matt's taste and love of Matt. But I was a little surprised to see Fred taken down there.
Yeah, no, I agree on some level. I think, you just have to think about like relatability of all this stuff. And I think like, Matt, even though he's, his position in life and all of his success is not relatable in basically any way, he's still just a normal guy. I mean, he grew up in Manhattan Beach, and like, he's just a very approachable guy. And he's not famous. And I think that's the big thing here. And I think like Fred is also like an incredibly approachable guy, but he's Fred Savage. And like everybody knows this guy, And I think just the relatability aspect of choosing somebody that has done exceptionally well for themselves in Matt, has impeccable taste, has this mantra of one in, one out, which I know people love. I could just see that being all right, like this guy is a little bit more relatable because he's not a television star,
Yeah, that's fair. It's totally fair.
Fred, come on, Fred is Fred,
Yeah, completely. All right, so we'll keep this moving. If you could have seen any head-to-head matchup, forget the bracket, right? Like, what would have been your dream matchup in the final? And it could be in the finals, or it could be just like a fun matchup earlier in the tournament.
I see this as almost like if you could have the two guys sit in the same video and just talk about watches. Yeah. And there's no question for me, the two that come up in my mind are Mayer JCB would be just the best. Because
that would be both like frantic.
For the people listening to this and not watching this on YouTube, Ben, the smile on Ben's face the moment James said that, I think broke the edges of the Zoom recording here.
Yeah, I mean
pretty
to
wild.
have, because they're both huge energies, but they're entirely different energies. Mayer has this calmness about him, especially if you're into his social media and the way that he kind of offers his kindness forward. And then I've had the great pleasure of being in several meetings that Jean-Claude Biver kind of burst into, that
is what he does. He doesn't enter a room; he bursts.
He bursts in like a third act in a great play, and he's suddenly there, and suddenly the tone has changed, and he's very loving and very he can be very focused on one thing, or he can kind of be pitching to the whole room. I think that video would be bonkers. And then the other one that I'd like, and this is more of not a power matchup, but just a complete difference in what I perceive as perspective, and I don't know either of these guys that well, would be Gary and Roger Smith.
Ooh, interesting.
I think it'd be fun to have those two guys come talk about watches from each of their own perspectives, because I think we're seeing a very disparate sort of route into the same sort of love.
Yeah. In a weird way, I'd love to see John Mayer circa 2013 versus John Mayer 2019.
What do you think that would do to John's brain?
Oh man, he's gonna see this or hear this later and think about that for 4 days.
Well, we have the technology. We could kind of make that happen.
Exactly. I think seeing Wei versus William. Wei and William to me are kind of they're the watch industry. They're just they're both total insiders. They both have dramatically different personalities. Wei is let's just hang out with everyone. William's I fucking hate everyone. But in his own charming way. And they both have Debathoons. They're both real watch guys. Almost at least contemporary watch guys. I'd like to see that one. What else? I think seeing Paramiko and Goldberger on the same screen at the same time would be cool. I've obviously known them. They're often in the same room. They're friends. That would be a cool one for sure. Just so suave and so well dressed and so Italian.
Yeah. There'd be so much chic Italian energy going on in that video.
Yeah, I agree.
Good jackets. There'd be a good jacket energy, I'm sure.
Oh my God, the Blazers would be out of control for sure.
Yeah, right.
I think for me, one of them, and it sounds like an obvious one, but Gary and Fred would be amazing.
That would be high energy.
Mostly because of the comments. Could you imagine if the two of them had gone head to head, what the comment section on that post would look like?
A lot.
Ben is now just shaking his head. I think seeing those two guys, especially because they're friends and they talk about watches all the time together, I think would just be super, super fun.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so the last thing I want to ask before we get into some more behind the scenes talking watches stuff, but the last thing about the bracket really is, what do you think was the toughest matchup for you to vote on? Which one did you find yourself I'm gonna take 10 minutes. I'm gonna rewatch these videos, before casting your vote.
I hate to say it for me, but it was the final round. I mean, these guys, as I said, they're two not only great friends, but great supporters of Hodinkee and great just advocates for the entire watch world, and they're both so different and so cool and have meant so much to all of us, So I would, it's expected, but the championship round was really a difficult one for me.
Yeah, I'd echo what Ben say, and then also add, I was following my boy Moki through the branch, and the Bayer Paramiko one was where I went back and actually again rewatched those videos, which I'd watched them because both of those fell in kind of my bracket or my set of brackets for a previous podcast. But I thought I'd give them both another chance and try not to come at it with too much of a, like, who could I pick that would kind of be most easily dealt with by Moki, and it turns out, Paramiko did well.
So I just thought of another one that actually really gave me pause, and that was Andretti versus Jack Nicklaus.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like, these are right now anyway. I'm super into golf for whatever reason. I've always been really into cars. Like, these are the guys, and they both just have they both kind of have similar auras. Like, they're both just like fierce competitors. I forget if we did this on the podcast or not, but like, who do you think would be better? Like, if they were forced to pick up the other one sport, Like, that's just like they would both try really, really hard. Like, they would both really get into it. That was a very difficult one for me, for sure.
As a follow-up to that thought, I thought about this after we recorded that several podcasts ago, but would you be really surprised if you found out that, like, Jack Nicklaus was also a pretty talented race car driver, or Mario Andretti was also a pretty talented golfer? Like, not really.
I would almost guarantee it, Like, I would
not
almost
at all.
Like, I feel like you could hand these guys almost any sport. You could make up a new sport and explain it to them, and they would, like, think for a few minutes and then immediately become in the top 5% of those who have ever touched the said tools of that sport.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just...
Dude, some people are just winners, man.
Yeah.
Athletes are athletes. That's true.
Yeah. All right, so I had two matchups, and they were both in the Elite 8 round. I found the one I was accused of fixing, Alton Brown, Gary Steingart, really, really tough. And then I also found Jean-Claude Beaver, Roger Smith, really tough. In the case of Alton and Gary, Gary is, as everyone knows, a friend. And he and I have extremely similar taste in watches, like very, very similar. Our collections overlap in multiple ways. And then Alton is somebody I've admired for a long time. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times and corresponding with him a few times. I love cooking, and I basically learned to cook from watching Alton Brown on like late night reruns on Food Network. And I think both of those guys just have such a like genuine passion for watches, and it's a genuine passion in a way that's very like day to day. Like, watches aren't like a separate thing that they do sometimes. Watches are like a part of how they approach every day of their lives, which I think is really relatable and nice. And then on the other side, we have Jean-Claude Beaver, have JCB, and Roger Smith, who are two titans of the watch industry in completely opposite ways. And they have completely opposite affects and very opposite collections. But I found choosing between those guys really tough, because it almost meant choosing between two sides of watches. And they're two sides that I love and respect. So, yeah, those were the toughest two, I think, for me.
Yeah, the Alton Gary one is a very good one, for sure. That was tough.
Yeah. While I've got you guys here, you've both been involved in shooting a lot of these. I mean, for a long time, Ben, you hosted every episode. And then since then, it's been a mix now for the last couple of years of us kind of rotating through whoever, we think is the best fit, or whoever's on deck to host these. So I wanted to start, Ben, with the early episodes. Do you have any fond memories from these early episodes? I mean, we saw that the earlier episodes kind of, tended to do better in this bracket, and there's just something special about them.
Yeah, no, we've kind of talked about the earliest few a lot, so I'll try to not rehash those. But I mean, the first few episodes, John, JJ, and John Goldberger were it was just like lightning in a bottle type stuff, like just seeing, like, throwing stuff out there, seeing what happens. I mean, the Paramiko one, I think back on, and like that one, I think this might be a question you have planned for later, but I'll talk about it now. Like, that was the one where we almost had the best watch ever in the video and then didn't. And that was just like, fuck, like, basically Paramiko had this watch that is like considered by many, including people we've discussed here, to be like top 3 watches of all time, like individual, like solitary watches of all time. And something happened where like we couldn't, he had sold it like a month before, or like we were delayed in filming or something like that. But we were this close to having, like, in my opinion, like top 3 wristwatch of all time in the video, which really would have changed everything. The Paramiko video is so awesome as is, and I think back on that collection often. But this one really, like, this was close to being like ridiculous, totally ridiculous.
Yeah, I think, my memories of being a part of those early episodes where I was there for recording a lot of them, your description of them as lightning in a bottle is kind of perfect. Like, we didn't really know any better at the time, so we were winging it a little bit, and we would show up and like we would prep and we'd talk to these folks and figure out what watches, but then like we would get to wherever we were shooting and just like the vibe and the energy, and once the watches came out, like they just kind of took off, you know, and Will, you know, did an amazing job kind of capturing that energy. And you know, to me, when I watch those episodes,
all the water glass shots.
Yeah, all the water glass shots. Those are great. We can insert some water glass B-roll here right now. But
it's his lens flare.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. But like watching those videos, like it captures a moment in time of Hodinkee for me, and like a way we did things and an energy and a vibe. And I think it does that maybe for longtime readers and watchers and listeners too.
Yeah, and the other one that I forgot to mention, but shouldn't, is Jason Singer. You know, Jason Singer was, I still have, like, he holds a special place in my heart because I'm obviously extremely American. And like, you know, there was just, for the longest time, there was really nobody that represented like the American in this incredibly kind of like, you know, Franco-centric or Italian-centric hobby. And Jason Singer has been a top tier collector for half a generation. You know, he's been doing this since the early 80s. I guess that would make it a generation. Like, and you know, that collection was just so absurd. And the fact that like this guy lives in the middle of nowhere, being Arizona, you know, he pulled out his collection. We were just like, holy fuck, you know, I mean, this is just like as good as like the best of the best. And he is such like, you know, myself, and I think you guys and a lot of these guys, like part of it is the collecting. They're like, okay, I want to find a great watch, and but it also like, okay, Jean-Claude Beaver bought an AP because he used to work at AP, you know. Jason is different. Jason's like, I just want the best things. I care about quality above all else. I care about rarity above all else. And like, you know, he used to, and I think still might, he would measure the thickness of lugs on Pateks to make sure that they haven't been polished. Like, we're talking like that level. It's not just like, can I eye it? Can I see original finish? It's like he would actually measure it like with a micron level caliper. I mean, he's just a different level of like, he's a real collector. Whereas a lot of these other guys, including myself, are like, it's fun. Like, it's a fun thing. And like, yeah, a great mint watch is going to get me excited. But like, Jason is a true academic level, you know, intellectual collector. He was a great one.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, James, from these early episodes, is there, if you could pick one where you could have just like been a fly on the wall, you know, been sitting, in the case of, you know, like John Mayer's original episode, be sitting and having lunch on the other side of the bar.
Sure.
Which episode would that be for you?
JCB. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I adore his personality. I love that he's 100%. And when you start to think about the effect he's had on the watch industry, and then not to just be that it was a business concern, like then you see the evidence of his actual passion in things that he's decided to call his own and dedicate, you know, some of his wealth to, and that sort of things. And he's just he has I don't think he would mind me saying this. I certainly don't think he would even know who I am. But you know, like he has a sort of like grandpa charm that I absolutely adore. When he enters a room, it's his room for that time. He's put in the work. Listen to him talk. He's going to say some friendly stuff. He always has some insight, and like look at the effect. Look at where he moved around in the industry and where those brands are now. And I think seeing that in on a table of watches, it's an insane amount of respect. And there's also like credit to Ben. I don't think he'd be the easiest guy to sit down with and have any control over the conversation at all. I think you just. I mean, it looks that way in the video, but like I think at a certain point, like the dice are in the air, and you just kind of you hope that they come down in your favor. And with that video, I think it was a very sweet video. It was a portrait of a man that adores watches to the extent that he's essentially devoted not only his life to this cool collection, but also to the industry at large, to the Swiss watch industry at large. And I think that's one of my most favorites.
I would agree. And I think like, you know, I know I've shared this story before, but I mean, the genesis of that video was like early days, you know, Hublot and Hodinkee just like did not get along. Like it just wasn't our thing, you know? And Jean-Claude back in 2012 said, hey, like, you know, I've seen what you guys do. I love it. Like, how come you guys don't feature Hublot more? And I was like, I gotta be honest, like it's just not our thing. Nothing against it, it's just not our thing. But I had heard through somebody that he was a big Patek collector. Asked him about that. He said, oh yeah, like I love it, I'd love to show you sometime. And I was like, well, how about we do a video on you instead of Hublot? And he said, okay, fine. And so we talked about the collection. And I just remember, I mean, keep in mind, he was the head of watches for LVMH, like major, I mean, still is major group. And I was like, you're okay talking almost exclusively about a competitor? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's my collection, you know? And at that point, I realized like he was effectively different than every other Swiss executive for sure, because they would never, ever do that, you know? And we go there and he spends an hour or more, really, you know, edited down, of course, talking about Paddock, AP. I mean, I confront him very explicitly and say like, hey, the Big Bang looks just like the offshore. He's like, yeah, like of course it does. You know, I mean, like, can you imagine any other executive saying that ever? You know, in the Swiss watch world, like never. And I think that in many ways, you know, really, it really built our relationship. You know, mine with Jean-Claude and with Hublot for sure, and certainly like introduced this legend who was always a legend. We had nothing to do with making him a legend. It reintroduced him to our generation. Like, I don't think people really understood how fucking this guy was before that video, you know?
Agreed. Yeah.
So legit.
And one of the coolest things is like he's been kind of a member of the Hodinkee family ever since, right? Like he came and he flew into New York for a day to speak at H10. And, you know, he's, you know, really been a part of our story. And we've been kind of fortunate to get to be a little bit tiny part of his story over the last, you know, 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah. The other thing I think, again, without, you know, giving us too much credit, is like John Goldberger was effectively an unknown, you know, unless you were like part of the auction scene or even the really dealer scene. Jason Stinger was for sure an unknown and really made a point of being like off the grid. Matt Jacobson, you know, a lot of these guys were really kind of unknown and really trusted us to kind of be the first to tell their story in this way, which is really risky, you know, and I get it. You know, I understand why there are reservations. Like, you're basically saying like, look, I'm really successful. I have spent, in some cases, an ungodly amount of money on things that don't mean anything to most people. And so they trusted us to tell those stories. And I think, you know, we've done right by them for sure. And this is a very special kind of community that would support it for sure. But I think, you know, now everybody knows who Goldberger is. Everybody knows who Jason Singer is and Matt Jacobson and all these guys. But back then, I mean, it was new for me and certainly new for our audience to get to know these personalities.
Yeah, I mean, we can all speak to this, but I want to start with you, Ben. You know, James mentioned a minute ago, like having control of the interview, and you've mentioned this idea of people trusting us to help tell their stories. And I wonder, like, how you guys and Ben, you specifically, prep going into an episode of this, because it is a responsibility, and you do kind of like need to have a little bit of control while also giving them room, but also like framing it in such a way that people are going to react positively to it. So we set these people up for success and to be appreciated rather than, you know, torn down or misunderstood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I don't do, I think Steven will probably guess this, but like, I don't do any real prep because, you know, I mean, that's for losers. No, I mean, but I think it's just, you know, primarily it's about making these people feel comfortable and having them understand that like, this is the real world, but it's also not the real world. Like, this is a microcosm for sure. And we do everything we can to make sure that they're appreciated for all that they are. And, you know, Will, who you mentioned, has done a great job editing. And, you know, I can't tell you how many notes I've received after these videos go live and just be like, wow, like I don't sound half that good in my normal conversation. How did you guys make me sound that good? You know? So we're not manufacturing anything. It's just like we're highlighting the strengths of people and their collections and making it fun and carefree. And, you know, as something to celebrate as opposed to something kind of, you know, looked down upon or otherwise.
Yeah. James, is it the same for you?
On the possible flip side of Ben, like I prepare excessively for the few talking watches that I've done, but that's also like
I would never have guessed that for the two of you.
Yeah, I mean Ben and I also come at it from a different level. Ben is a hardcore collector with a huge knowledge base, like a wide-ranging, huge knowledge base and understanding of both like taste and specific models. And I came into watches very much at a product level, say 10 years ago. So I'm still developing that back history. So if you want to talk, what do you got there? An Apple Watch, okay.
Yeah, talking about like levels of history.
So yeah, I kind of enter that differently, and I see these as not unlike what Ben said. I see these as profiles of personality, because that's what watch collecting is. That's what car collecting is. That's what art collecting is. It's an expression of what's inside you, your personal taste, your temperament, your ability to connect with times that aren't your own in many ways. You know, a lot, especially when you get into vintage watches or you know, vintage cars, the same thing. And all I want to do is know enough about somebody that when they answer a question, I can have some sort of a thoughtful response. I don't want to say that much. I definitely don't want to say that much. Gray, who's on this recording and just not visible, he knows that when you give me 3 sentences to say in a row, it will take me 35 tries to get them in the correct order. And often it's in like 105 degree heat, in some sunny location where we shoot these things. And so, yeah, mostly my goal with these is always just, can you get out of the way of the person so that their personality can just kind of shine through. And once they're comfortable, they're just going to pour out their love of these watches. And I think that's all that someone watching wants to see. They don't want to see me talk like at all. You can't do this without a host, so you have to be there. But
yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, that's kind of how I measure after a shoot how successful it was, is like the less I talked, the better the episode's going to be,
For sure.
Because the more the person we already discussed this. I'm getting the veto here, but yeah, the less I talk, the better. Like, nobody's going to be able to tell that person's story better than them. Nobody's going to be able to show their excitement and their passions better than them. And if I can get them to a point where they feel comfortable just sharing, and like, I don't need to ask them, question, answer, for every sentence, like, all the better. And the way I prep for that is by researching the people generally, not their watches. Like, I have enough watch knowledge, I can figure that out usually. But by researching the people, like, hopefully I can relate to them a little bit, and we can have like a real human conversation, and not a like questions 1 through 12 interview about watches sitting on a table.
Another video I want to give a quick shout out to that we haven't talked about is Ronnie Madvani. I know that's a favorite of Gary's. Like, that is just like, that's a collection. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of these just like, all right, here's a grouping of watches. That is like a tight collection.
That's very true. So I've got 2 more questions. Of all the Talking Watches episodes, if you had to swap for one of the collections, which one would it be? You give up all your watches, but you get the Talking Watches collection. Whose collection are you taking?
For me, it's easy, but James, you want to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah, I would say Reza. Give me Reza's collection. But I want the stuff that was off camera as well.
You want it all?
Okay.
Well, it's the collection, right? If he's getting my like 8 watches, like, it's only fair.
All right.
Yeah, I adore the guy. I like the level of passion that he has for kind of a specific thing, and yeah, it'd be Reza. Mayer too. Some pretty incredible stuff in there, and then I don't want to step on what I believe Ben's.
I was going to say, I could see you wearing that 6270, that Daytona.
Hell yeah, right? Why not? Or he's got a 5164A on a brown, or on the green, which is a dream of mine. Like, he's got some solid stuff, and I'm not going to step on what I think will be Ben's answer. So I'll let him pick it up.
What do you think is my answer?
Singer.
Actually, no, but close.
Okay.
I mean, I would die to have one of his watches, but yeah.
Right? Yeah.
All right. Whose collection are you taking, Ben?
Well, it's Goldberger. There's no question about it. Like, he's, I've said this in writing, like, he's my idol as a collector. He has taught me so much. Like, there are actually, when we produced that video, he had those 3 split second, the Universal, the Minerva, and the capped chronograph. I was wearing my Henry Graves Universal, and I just started like really falling in love with the Corelli split. I now own one. I mean, I bought that truly because of that afternoon with him. He has that white gold perpetual Breguet that's kind of rectangular.
Oh,
I have
that watch.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have a Jump Hour Breguet that is kind of in the same production line as that. He is an inspiration for that for sure. So, not even to talk about the white gold 6265, which is absurd. It's just like, it's just not a thing. And the one thing I was thinking about why I might not want that collection is like, I love the early stuff, the 30s and 40s, the step bezel stuff, and like those Longines 13ZN and sector dials and all that. But at the end of the day, like, when I'm kicking around, like, I do want to wear like a Rolex Oyster watch, or like, a waterproof Omega, like a Speedmaster or Seamaster, whatever. And I was like, shit, Goldberger doesn't really have that in his collection. But then I remember the white gold Daytona, which has a screw down crown in white gold.
I love that that's going to be your kicking around watch.
Yeah, I mean, come on. If you're Goldberger, that's what you do,
It's true.
But I think also, like, that's absurd, and at like, the very pinnacle of some mountaintop of collecting. I think John Mayer episode 1, like, come on, that's just like, it's blue chip stuff. You can't, it's a 5970, it's a mill sub. It's a 6263. Like you could kind of stop with those 3 watches right there, And similarly, the Paramiko collection, the watch that I'm referring to that like didn't get shown in that collection, what was like basically 30 days away from being featured, was the JB Champion unique watch, which is like that sold for more than the Clapton Platinum 2499 at auction. Like it is considered by many like one of the greatest watches ever made. And Alfredo owned that watch up until like 30 days before we did that video. So that would be up there as well for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Steven?
So my instinct at first was to maybe say Gary's collection, but I realized that's because it's basically a collection of watches that like I either currently own, have owned, or like am on the verge of owning. So I'm gonna let that slide because that's basically just saying like I wouldn't change anything. I think I would take Matt Jacobson's collection.
Great choice.
I like that it's a tight collection. I like that it's like really well edited, which appeals to me. It's a mix of like vintage Rolex. He's got, the 3700 Nautilus that's in like unbelievable condition, about as good a condition as you would want to actually still wear it, which is important. But then he's got weird stuff. Like he's got the Beta 21s, which I just love. Those Pateks, they're huge, they're heavy, they're on removable bracelets that like, as he says in the video, like he can't figure out how the bracelets were made. They're just so weird, which I find appealing that there's something like that in the collection. A mix of Rolex sport watches. And then if we're talking about stuff that's outside the collection, or was outside the video, I know Matt has acquired quite a few things since, some really beautiful Daytonas, other Rolex sport models, and then a Creedor, an Ichi, which we talked about when we had him on Hodinkee Radio. And to me, that watch actually is what like tips it for me, is to have a collection that has like great vintage Rolex, great vintage Patek, 2526, 3448, like really incredible, like beautiful minimalist stuff. Oh yeah, there we go. Ben's just killing me here with this white gold 2526.
I won't sell it without coming to you first, I promise.
I appreciate that. That's all I've asked. That to me is just like, it feels like a very me collection. So I think I'll go for that I'll go for fit over like pure quantity and like objective quality there.
Jason, and now that I've been thinking about what you said, James. Like the Jason Singer collection was absurd, and now obviously I know the other watches that he has and since purchased, and just absurd. Sorry, I wish I had headphones in, but I don't. Just absurd stuff. Really like the best of the best of the best. I mean, his white gold 3448, which he now has on a bracelet, just like come on. I mean, that's a dream,
Yeah, the Singer collection was my natural answer, and then I wanted to make sure we had some variety, so I went with a couple there. But I mean, Singers. I mean, it'd be, if I could, you give a collection like that to a guy like me, I sit down and just learn about each one. It'd be a whole. Yep. You'd have an education. That's a 4-year degree in incredible watches.
Yep.
Just
really cool stuff. Really thoughtful.
For sure.
All right, so to wrap things up here, I got a question for you, Ben. You Talking Watches is your and Will's brilliant creation here. You've been deeply a part of it since before episode 1. We're now 53 in. You've got a whole team of people making episodes now, multiple producers, multiple hosts, the whole thing. Where do you want to see it go from here? Like if you could come back in 5 years and see what Talking Watches is like, what would you hope it looks like?
Yeah, I'd love to figure out a way to get more. First of all, to do more of them. I think this is our number one requested editorial product by a country mile. People just want this all the time. It is very difficult to produce. I mean, much more so than I think people really understand, at least to our standards or the standards that we've imposed upon ourselves. So there's certainly more of them. And I think, just really striking a really great balance of celebrity and real people. We often tell stories of great sentimental watches. We typically write those stories. But I think we could use this format to tell them in meaningful ways. The Moki video was a great example. The Long Return, which was not a Talking Watches, could have been, in a weird way. There are things that we produced that have been really wonderful and a little bit more kind of like human. And we didn't put those in the Talking Watches category. Maybe we should have. So I think, focusing more on a little bit more real life stuff as well as, the crazy stuff. And like, there's some guys that we know are out there that we just have to get around to filming. They're mostly in Europe, arguably the biggest vintage watch collector in the world, we know. And, we'll be getting to that at some point. There's Ed Sheeran, which we know we'll get to at some point. There's some bangers that are like right on the edge of occurring. Yeah. It's just a matter of making the time. First of all, being able to leave your house, that would be helpful.
That helps, yeah.
And then beyond that, being able to get in a car and get on an airplane. But it's the one thing I would just want to remind people of is that, like, this is like, none of these videos are sponsored at all in any way. Like there's not $1 coming to us for doing this stuff. Like, we just do this because it's the best content there is. And I know that doesn't seem like any great notion, but like, this stuff is incredibly expensive and incredibly time consuming. And it's a lot, so I wish we could figure out a way to kind of do more of them without deviating from the products that actually do kind of pay all of our salaries, and it's really tricky. I think we found a good balance, but I would love to be able to do more of them and have people like, I'd love to have a team dedicated to talking watches full time. I mean, make it a series, but maybe with time, the business is doing okay. So who knows,
There we go. Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, check out the comments. Let us know your favorite episodes. Feel free to answer any of the questions we talked about today. Like we've said before, like, the best part of doing this is talking about it with all of you guys. Ben's waving watches at the screen there.
So I've got watches on my desk here, and it's just like, I'm just looking at them, talking to you guys.
We're doing an impromptu Ben Clymer talking watches now.
Yeah, I mean, this is not anything you know about, but this watch is so good.
Yeah, honestly, that might be the watch I'm wearing most while working from home.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing this and for making Watch Madness so awesome. And we'll have you back on. We'll talk again soon.
See ya.
Take care.
Thanks, team.